Everyone has their different tales about the strange and bizarre. My tale is how my half-whole mask saved my life, and how it continues to save my life to this very day. Late last December, I was traveling north from California to my home state of Oregon. Nothing fancy, I was just going to visit family for the holidays. On my way north, though, I hit a small snowstorm. Nothing awful, just a lot of snow falling at once. I wasn't worried about the small increase of snow at first, considering I had snow tires installed. I did, however, get a little hesitant to drive when the snow really started to come down. The increasing amount of falling snow, coupled with the amount already covering the ground, caused me to consider finding a place to stay for the night. I figured I can get some sleep while the storm passes over. That, and I could give my car's heater a break before it decides to burst into flames, or worse, just stop working altogether. I scanned as much of the landscape as I could, but there were no buildings in the immediate area. The only other option that I had for my predicament was to just keep driving and just hope that there was a town or an exit nearby. I must have been driving for at least an hour before I saw a sign up ahead indicating how far the closest city was. My heart sank a little when I read it was 162 miles away, as it flew past my windshield and vanished into the snowy night. At this point, the snow was beating against my windshield, and I knew I was going to last 162 minutes, let alone 162 miles. The clock on my radio said it was 1:21 a.m., and I decided then, the next turnoff I saw, I would take it and hope I could just find a neighborhood that would produce some results. My thought process was either freeze to death in my car, or stay the night at some random person's house. Weighing the two options in my head, I picked the only one a sane person would and went with the house. Another 30 minutes or so flew by and still no luck finding a place to pull off. Just when I was starting to lose hope, I saw a turnoff in the distance. A small shape started to make its way closer to my headlights, and upon further inspection, it was revealed to me that they were two wooden poles, possibly belonging to a fence. When I turned on that road between the two wooden poles, the ground beneath me started to feel rocky and rough, like I was traveling on gravel. I didn't drive for too long before I started to see a small cabin creep into my field of view. The lights of the cabin were off, but the place seemed to be in good shape. Parked my car under a tree that took residence on the cabin's front lawn. Get out of my car, I immediately grabbed my extra jacket, put it on, and pulled my half-whole mask over my ears to keep the heat around my face. Put on my beanie and walked up towards the cabin. As I traveled to what I felt was my salvation, I immediately regretting not getting any gloves for my hands. Despite the irritation I had with my hands, my face and the rest of my body were comfortably warm, so I didn't have much room to complain. I stuffed my frozen hands into my pockets and continued my journey across the cabin's frozen lawn. As I made my way to the door, I noticed something odd. There was no indication of life anywhere. There wasn't even a car in the front yard. Taking my right hand out of my pocket, I knocked on the door 3 times before saying, "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm sorry to bother you so late at night, but it's so cold, and I need a place to stay just for a few hours." No one answered my plea for help, so I knocked 3 more times, hitting the knuckles harder on the wooden door. "Hello? I'm not here to rob you or anything. I just... I just need a place to stay for the rest of the night. I promise I will be gone by sunrise. As I finished my sentence, I touched the ornate metal on the door handle, noticing the door seemed to be unlocked. I said in a louder voice, "I'm coming in now. If there's anyone in there, please let me know." I pressed the metal lever down, finding it a bit odd that the door was unlocked. The door opened with little resistance, and I used the same amount of resistance to close it. Looking around the area, I noticed the cabin had 5 rooms in total. The living room, which was the biggest, a small kitchen, an even smaller bathroom, and what I assumed were 2 small bedrooms in the back. No lights were inside, making the cabin almost appear pitch dark. Thankfully, my eyes were already adjusted to the darkness, so I decided the best thing to do would be to search for a light switch. So I took out my phone, turned on my flashlight app to scan the walls. My scan produced 0 results, however, and at the risk of losing precious battery power, I decided the best thing to do would be to turn off the light and put my phone into airplane mode. Before turning off my light, though, I studied the paintings on the wall that I glossed over in the initial scan. Each painting that crossed my sights was just typical landscapes or harbors. There was one that looked like a fox hunter or something like that, but that was about it. Nothing you wouldn't find in an elderly person's home. There was one painting, however, that caught my attention. The painting was small and consisted of what looked like 2 adults, a mother and a father, a teenage girl, and a small child. The family captured in that painting were wearing what looked like Victorian-era clothing. I'm only guessing about the clothes. I mean, they could have been from the early 1800s or 20th century. The point is, the clothing was very ornate and regal. There was something really disturbing about the image, though. The faces of 3 of the family members looked like they were smoothed over with clay. It's kind of hard to describe, but it looked like they had no facial features. And by no facial features, I mean, instead of the ones you and I have, these people in the painting had grooves of smooth flesh where their eyes, nose, and mouths were supposed to be. It was disturbing, to say the least. The only person in the painting that didn't possess a blank face was the teenage girl, which had normal facial features for a teenage girl. In fact, she was quite breathtaking. I pulled myself away from the painting to take a glance at my phone for the time. It was a little past 2 o'clock, so I decided to go into the back room and check and see if it was occupied. To my relief, the room was vacant, besides a medium-sized bed, ornate dresser, and a nightstand. The walls were blank, besides more sappy paintings to give it a little more atmosphere. Although there was no indication of a heating system, besides a chimney in the living room, the rooms were bearable enough that I figured I could just bundle up in my clothes, get under the covers, and use that to stay warm. I was only going to be there for a few hours anyway, so there wasn't much of a point in starting a fire. Plus, the people who owned the cabin wouldn't be back tonight, considering how late it was. I hopped into the worn-out bed, facing what I assumed was the closet door, pulled my mask up completely over my face to make sure my head would stay warm, and pulling a little bit of the fabric down to see my phone and set an alarm for 4:30. I put my phone on the nightstand and covered my face again. Bundled up with the sheets, I let dreamland take me away. Until I woke for what only felt like minutes later, to the sound of scratching. My body froze as I heard the noise over and over again, softly coming from the closet door. try to calm myself down, thinking, must be a mouse or some other animal. Either way, I quietly shifted onto my back, pulling my mask down slightly so a little slit appeared, giving me a small window to look out of. I laid on the bed, stiff as a board, with my beanie and mask covering my face in such a way that it acted like a visor, giving me a small peek out in the darkness. Thankfully, my eyes were still adjusted to the dark, which gave me a small amount of reassurance as I continued looking in the direction the noise was coming from. The scratching continued louder and longer for what seemed like minutes, until just like that, it suddenly stopped. Silence filled the room again. But it wasn't a safe kind of silence. The silence in the room was foreboding, ominous. Just when I began to calm myself down, the doorknob to the closet began to jiggle and turn very slowly. My heart was racing out of my chest as I saw the knob turn. Every inch of my body wanted to bolt out of that cabin before whatever was on the other side of that closet door came out to get me. But I laid perfectly still, despite the fact I had a cocktail of adrenaline going through my veins. My eyes widened as the closet door opened and saw what looked like a dried out head attached to an elongated neck following a skeletal body. The thing that was emerging from the closet crawled on all fours out of the doorway, making its way to my bed. I have never been more frightened in my entire life as the thing stood up, almost hitting the roof of the cabin, and looked down in my direction. The creature just stood there, studying me as I peeked through the thin slit in my mask. Pure terror swirling around in my head as I glanced at the body of the creature. Looking at the creature's skeletal face, I noticed it had no eyes in its sockets, which led me to believe that it couldn't see me, even though I could see it. Just in the idea of it not being able to see me started to give me a little comfort. The creature began to speak. Strange. The creature whispered softly as it continued to watch me, before it started to speak again. It had no fear of me. The creature continued to say in a hoarse tone as it began to breathe loudly, continuing to look at me, gripping down the edge of my bed. The only thing to stop me from jumping up and leaving was that maybe the creature believed I was asleep or dead and wouldn't attack. How can it not fear? How can it not fear me? The thing said through its clenched teeth, before loudly gasping and pulling back with its mouth open in an expression that seemed like fear. It has no face! No face! No face! The thing just whispered that to itself and started to back away. It has no face! No face! It has no face! No face! The creature said again, but this time louder and slightly more threatening. No face! No face! No face! The creature shouted as it backed away further from the bed. I heard the thing breathing loudly before calming down and returning to the side of the bed. Leaning over me, the creature continued to look at me softly, beginning to breathe on my face. I could smell its foul breath even through my mask. It was so powerful. It took all my strength not to gag as a reflex to that stench. In my mind, I made the choice to keep motionless and not do or say anything that would compromise whatever illusion I was giving the creature, who was currently just standing there, looking at me. The stench from its breath I can only describe as pure death, which only strengthened my resolve to remain perfectly motionless. Strange. The thing whispered at me again, leaning close to the point where I could see its decaying flesh. The creature slowly reached for me, its hand slowly moving towards my face. With every inch that decaying hand moved, I couldn't help but feel my situation becoming more and more dire. I thought this was it for me. The creature would kill me tonight, or take me away, torture me, then kill me. No one would know what would happen to me. No one would find my body out here. No one would know my story. I could feel tears starting to swell up in my eyes as I thought of everyone I ever loved just being yanked away from me in this moment. No face, no face, no face, the creature softly chanted as its hands crept closer to my face. I could hear the anguish in the creature's voice as it continued chanting that over and over again. As the creature's long, bony hand crept only centimeters away from my face, I braced myself for the worst, making the last thoughts that I would ever have about the people that I loved. Just as I thought my life was all over, a sudden loud noise erupted from the room, filling it with a flood of beeps and causing the creature to scream and jump back. As the noise continued, the creature threw itself back against the wall, shrieking uncontrollably in terror as it stumbled backwards towards the closet. I was dumbstruck for a second, but then that's when it occurred to me. I set my alarm for 4:30. That's what the noise must have been. I jumped out of bed, pointing the screen at the monster as the alarm continued to ring loudly. The loud ringing caused the monster to shriek even more in confusion and in terror as it retreated quicker as I approached. Seeing my chance, I activated my phone's flashlight and put the strobe mode on to disorient the monster further. No face! No face! No face! No face! The creature shrieked at me as it withdrew to the safety of the closet. I continued to shine my light on the creature. And I also started playing loud music and continued to jab the phone in the monster's direction like a lion tamer. The thing threw itself into the dark recesses of the closet, and I locked the door and shoved the dresser in front of it. The shrieks coming from the monster started to get fainter and weaker, like it was retreating deeper into the house somehow. No face! No face! No face! I can hear the creature yell out as it got further and further away. After hearing the retiring words of the thing that terrified me the whole night, I bolted from the cabin at breakneck speed, jumped in my car, and drove the hell out of there. I pulled my mask down, exposing my skin, which was as white as the snow on the ground. I was so frightened by the whole experience. I pulled into the first town I saw and just parked my car into a convenience store parking lot and just sat there and sobbed uncontrollably for a while. The experience that I had been through would scar me for life. But as I wept in the car in that parking lot, I couldn't help but laugh. Laughing between my fits of crying. I got through my ordeal without so much as a scratch on me. Physically, I was fine. I was alive. I didn't have to worry anymore. As I finished with my whole episode of crying and laughing like an insane person, I entered the store wiping away my tears. I wanted some water and something for my stomach. I noticed the cashier was looking at me before he realized I noticed and went back to whatever he was doing before. Ooh, the store was mostly empty. Besides an elderly couple, I was the only customer there. I got my items, walked up to the cashier, started speaking to me in an accent which took me by surprise. "Had a rough night?" the cashier said while he scanned my items. "You have no idea." "Well, I noticed you look a bit upset when you came in. What happened? Going through a breakup?" he said, looking at me as the register computed how much I owed him. Looking at the young man behind the register, he seemed a little younger than I was. Although that doesn't say much. Even though I'm 22, I look younger than my actual age. I looked at the cashier's name tag. Evan. Feeling I had nothing to lose, I decided to tell him about my frightening tale. And after I was finished, something odd happened. I was expecting him to burst out laughing or say I was the best liar he had ever talked to, but instead of doing any of that, he just stood there, staring at me with an expression so horrified. It gave me the impression that he just witnessed someone get run over by a train or something. "Hey, Evan, are you okay?" I said. "What? Oh, yeah, it's just..." Just then, I began to feel eyes burn into the back of my head. So, I turned around and I saw the old couple who were the only other customers in the store. And they had that same horrified look that Evan just had a few seconds ago. They must have heard the story I told. After a few moments of silence, the old couple asked me what I knew about that cabin, to which I couldn't really say. I did give them the best description I could about what I saw, though. The couple then proceeded to tell me about the cabin, about how long it's been there, and that it was haunted by a presence so terrifying that the place was condemned and left to rot away after so many people disappeared there. They told me that no one who has ever stayed in that cabin has ever been seen alive again, if they're ever seen at all after their visit. One of my best mates stayed the night at that cabin, Evan said quietly as he stared off into the distance, but continued his thoughts with, "I refused to go into that place. I knew something bad would happen if we went. I tried so hard to convince him that the dare was stupid, to not go in, but he refused to be labeled as a coward, and continued with the dare." Evan's eyes began to water as he continued his story. "I never saw him again after that night. I kept calling his house, but his parents still couldn't find him. We put out flyers, billboards, but we never had any luck. After a few days, we contacted the police, and I told them about that cabin." Evan began to choke down in tears as he clenched his fist. "They found him in the basement of that place, sprawled out on the floor. His eyes were surgically removed from his sockets, his nose removed, his lips, they were sliced off. They found him naked with an incision from the bottom of his rib cage. All of his internal organs were extracted from his body, and to add insult to injury, his genitals were sliced off too. But you want to know the worst part about all this? When the police did their autopsy, they said he was alive during that whole process." Oh God. Evan winced as he remembered the whole gruesome sight and said, "They never found who did it, or what did it. There was no DNA evidence. They didn't even find the tools to make... They didn't even find the tools that made the incisions. They found nothing. Evan clenched his fist tighter on the table before the old man, listening to our conversation, put his hand on his shoulder to reassure him that everything was going to be alright. As he comforted Evan, he looked at me and said, "People have been disappearing from that area for decades. Maybe even centuries for all we know. But the bodies were always found in the same gruesome way. I don't care who you are. No one deserves something like that happening to them. They should just burn that evil place to the ground." The old lady joined in her husband's side and looked at me with the most foreboding face I had ever seen. "If your story is true, you should consider yourself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. In all my years of living, you are the only one to go into that cabin and come out alive," the woman said, gripping her husband's hand tightly as she spoke to me. After hearing the old woman's words, I realized that Evan said that the body of his friend was found in the basement, which explains why the monster's voice got fainter. It would have pulled me into the basement if my phone hadn't gone off. I quickly paid for my items and left, now more troubled than I was when I entered. Feeling drowsy due to my lack of sleep, I decided to go to a hotel and spend the day sleeping or relaxing to get my mind off things. That night, I sat on the bed in my hotel room and looked at the two items that saved my life. In one hand, I gripped onto my mask, which hid my face from that terrible monster. And in my other, I had my phone, which scared away the horrible beast that would have killed me. I decided from that day on, I would always wear my half-whole mask to bed. It saved my life. It's the least I can do for it. The recent brush with death I just experienced had taught me that life is too precious to waste. So I decided to ask my best friend Samantha out on a date, and things worked perfectly. Samantha and I were together for 2 years before I recently asked for her hand in marriage. And she said yes. Part of me will never forget that awful night. And because of it, not only have I been wearing my half-whole mask to bed every night since then, I have also made it a priority not to live in any type of house that has a basement. And as an added safety measure, I started locking every door before going to bed. It's a pain, but you can never be too careful. Despite these crazy precautions, Samantha has accepted my little quirks and has continued to be supportive as we continue our journey through life together. I couldn't be happier with the way things turned out with my life. I am so lucky to be with Samantha. Everything's just perfect. There is one thing that bothers me though, and I think it might be my imagination, but sometimes when I wake up at night and it's really quiet, sometimes hear soft scratching noises. Also, I think it's just paranoia, but I swear, sometimes I hear something whisper, "No fair."